Hello all, Casual New Gamer back at you with another video. Oh yeah, this is gonna be an old school kind of video. I'm not even sure if I have these type of videos still on my channel, but this is a tinfoil hat theory. So the question is that Sony or PlayStation or maybe Sony also, I'm not sure exactly who has the stake in this, but Sony and or PlayStation have a stake in EVO, the fighting championships, tournaments, kind of the fighting scene. And as a result, so to, I guess, maximize their brand effectiveness, I guess you would call it, Sony slash PlayStation has done things like they've recently come out with I believe it's going to be exclusive, an exclusive fighting game called Marvel Tokon, where they had, who was, I forgot the name of the company, but it wasn't Capcom. So it's a Marvel 4v4 fighter, 2D side-scrolling fighter game that is going to be, I believe it's coming out, I want to say next year in 2026. I know that very soon there's going to be a closed beta, I want to say, for the game. So I theorized, because there was recently, so there's a game series called Marvel vs. Capcom, made by Capcom, with Capcom fighters who make Street Fighter and Marvel characters. And that was a long-running series. And one of the last entries in that was Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite, which that game recently got an update. Basically, I forgot exactly now what the update was, but it was a big update. It was, I think, about something like 35 gigabytes, I want to say. I made a video on it, and I theorized that they did that to basically get an idea, Capcom, if there's an interest. I kind of feel like that they basically took a look at this Marvel Tokon fighter that PlayStation is making, and obviously PlayStation got the license from, I would think they got the license from Marvel. Obviously, if they're using, I think that's what PlayStation said in the video they made. So I would imagine that Capcom saw that and kind of realized that maybe, I don't know why they never made a sequel to Marvel vs. Capcom, unless it was, maybe it was they had to pay for the license to make the game again. And maybe they were, because they just recently re-released the Marvel vs. Capcom Arcade Collection, which had a bunch of Marvel vs. Capcom fighting games that Capcom has made over the years in one collection. And one of them was it was Marvel vs. Capcom 2 that was delisted. And if you owned it digitally, I think you could still play it digitally. You could re-download it if the server would allow you to on other systems. I believe it was on the PS3, but then there were physical copies of it. And the underground scene, or basically the fans of that game, have been basically playing that game with each other. I think even like at like smaller tournaments or whatnot. So, Capcom bringing that back was a big thing. I even picked it up myself. I picked up a physical edition and a digital edition just so I have it. And, obviously the physical they can't take away from me unless they come to my house. So if that ever disappears, I will have the ability to play that. It is a very hectic. Like I watch people play these fighting games, and I get in my head that, oh, I'd like to play this. But then once I turn it on, I'm like, oh, I'm really just trash at this game. But my point of this video is that I think that Capcom got very upset at Sony because Capcom had made Street Fighter 5, there's Street Fighter 6 now, but Street Fighter 5 was an exclusive to the PlayStation platform, and it didn't sell well. And I don't think it was exactly because of the exclusivity. I think it was more because of how they rolled out the characters, which they kind of did something not as bad, but something similar with Street Fighter 6. Although from what I understand, see, I own Street Fighter 5, but I've never really played it. And apparently, there's a bunch of DLC, and they basically made at launch not your normal Street Fighter roster. Like, a lot of the roster was DLC. So if you wanted like your normal characters, I'm not sure exactly who was not included at launch or in the base game. But yeah, so Street Fighter 6 kind of remedied that. But the point of all this is that I think that Capcom basically, listen, I don't know this for a fact. That's why this is a tinfoil hat theory. I feel that Capcom was upset that PlayStation got this exclusive fighting thing. PlayStation to back up the EVO thing with the fighting stuff that they got, and to get a fighting game of their own. Because certain games go to the EVO championships. Like, they kind of have to be, I guess, like announced as these games people can compete for, the tournaments of EVO for different games to basically play the games, I guess. I'm not sure exactly how it works, but so basically Sony also made a fighting stick that they're talking about, an arcade fighting stick, which a lot of like professional fighters like to use fighting sticks. So Sony is making one that is going to be specific. So they're really getting behind all this fighter stuff, and now they're basically relinquishing their claim to EVO, and I think, if I understand correctly, they're going to be, running EVO for at least the rest of this year, maybe even into next year. But then starting next year, there's going to be a different set of people that aren't going to be from PlayStation or Sony doing EVO, unless they just want, like, maybe people are saying that it's kind of like Sony is too into all this fighting stuff, and they just want Sony not controlling everything, kind of almost like a monopoly of the industry of fighting. But it could also be that Capcom said, hey, we don't like what's going on, or maybe even Capcom threatened to pull out Street Fighter 6 because, Capcom can say, hey, we don't want our game here in this tournament. And then if Capcom pulls out Street Fighter 6, and then Marvel vs. Capcom 2, which have, a lot of people, maybe they preemptively pulled their stuff saying that Sony is too controlling of things and they wanted it more impartial or something like that. And they kind of forced Sony's hands to pull themselves out of this. So that's my kind of, it's not too crazy of a theory that Capcom, they have enough, kind of skin in the game for fighting games to say, hey, they basically got, their bread and butter, which is Marvel vs. Capcom, and before Sony can kind of put that game out there to get any kind of traction going with that, maybe they put an impartial kind of jury running EVO, and that's why Sony doesn't have, I guess, a vested interest. I don't even know if I'm using these terms correctly, or exactly what's going on with it. But I did hear that Sony is not going to be, its EVO is not going to be run by Sony or PlayStation, whatever you want to call it, anymore, like they were going to do. And I kind of find it very strange, because Sony was kind of dominating that kind of field with the fighting stuff. They have a fighting stick, an exclusive fighting game. They have a tournament where they could choose to show off. So maybe they were gonna, start pushing other places. Maybe maybe Sony went to Capcom and said, "Hey, look, we got all this stuff going with fighting. If you don't come in and make another exclusive game for us," maybe Sony was forcing other companies to, make more fighting stuff exclusive to Sony. And the other fighting games all got together and said, "Hey, we're all going to pull out of EVO if you don't, trade it out, because all you have is that Marvel Tokon, that one fighting game." So, yeah. But, I mean, listen, where there's smoke, there's fire. And if something doesn't seem right, then trust your instincts. And, these corporations, the big, and pretty much any corporation, they're all there to make money. And this is something, if they're pulling out of this, then staying in it was costing them money. So what can cost them money unless the other fighting games kind of banded together and said, "Hey, we're just going to pull out of EVO and do our own thing"? So, yeah, I mean, I'm sure Sony is still going to make money off EVO, but they won't have a vested interest in running EVO. I think that's what the change exactly was. Don't quote me if I'm wrong. I'm just, yeah. Like I said, I see people playing fighting games on YouTube, the video clips from the players, and I'm like, ooh, I want to do that. And then I'm like, and then I think about, like, how much time that these players must have spent practicing these games. I mean, it's currently the end of August, and I still haven't finished Donkey Kong Bonanza. And I haven't been 100% through the levels, so I have no excuse for why I haven't gone through this game. So yeah, if I'm not going to put the time into a single player game like that, am I really going to go that hard? Although I did play the Daemon X Machina Titanic Scion demo. I played the PlayStation 5 version. I was going to check out the Switch version to see what the difference is. And I told the online Nintendo website thing to download the demo to my system, along with a few other things, and it never did it. And then I went online, looked up the demo, and as soon as I went online, it started to start the download. So it just took a little time. For some reason, it didn't work in sleep mode. So yeah. Anyway, like, subscribe, comment. tell me below, how off base am I with this tinfoil hat theory? Am I not describing what's going on correctly with PlayStation slash Sony and EVO? What do you think is going on? Why would Sony basically back away and not have, I guess, like vested or whatever they're doing? Why do you think they would do that? What's your theory? Hit the bell notification to know when I put out my videos, and you have a good rest of your day and or night. Later.